I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramble Man Podcast episode number 104. This one's with Bill Connor, and I talked to him about what it's like serving in the military. I don't think there's any real good place to follow Bill online, but if he listens to this and changes his mind and has somewhere to follow him, he can let me know, and I will tag it on a future episode or make a special post about it. But I really do appreciate Bill for coming on. It was interesting hearing perspectives from someone who served in the military for essentially his entire career. Sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media consultation company based here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So they do work for clients big and small all over the country, all over the globe, in fact. But they also do photography, videography, video editing, and audio editing, website design, SEO, writing, content development. Hell, they'll babysit your kids if it nets them money. So make sure you give them a follow on social media on either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Feral Giant. And be sure to give them an email today and hire them for your next project. Without much further ado, here's the episode. Are you originally from here?
No, I grew up in Hampton, Virginia. Lived there until I went off to college at Virginia Commonwealth University, and that's where I met my wife. And we had been travel agents for, I guess, about a year or so. And when we were hitting right at our 1-year mark, that was when Desert Storm started.
Okay.
And a lot of people now, because of COVID, they can see ripple effects of how one thing affects another thing, affects businesses. Well, when that war broke out, everybody stopped traveling. So,
really,
being in the travel business, well, when you don't know what's going on, you're thinking, what all is being affected by this? So, people getting on cruise ships and things, that really wasn't happening. So, because of that, we kind of took a look at what we might want to do, and travel was a big one. I wanted to finish college. She had finished. I hadn't finished, and that's when I went to the local recruiter and went to the Air Force, and I said, don't know what you call it, but Robin Williams, Good Morning Vietnam, that's the job that I want. We want to see the world. We really don't want to be stationed stateside, and I want to hear about that GI Bill thing. And man, by the time she was done, I was hooked. And that's that's how Hampton, Virginia got us to the Air Force and eventually here to Tennessee.
Although I'm going to go back to what made y'all choose to be travel agents? Was it wanting to travel? And
no, it was a crazy thing. I had a college job back in the days when people carried pagers instead of cell phones.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like a customer service rep. So it's funny to think of how antiquated this is, but at the time being in college, it was a very fun job to work for a beeper company, because if your beeper doesn't work, you call in and you say, my beeper doesn't work, I need a replacement. So they would get one ready. My job was to go to you give me your old pager, I would make the phone calls to swap out your number, you get a good pager, I take your broken one and take it back. So I spent all day just driving around town. And one day a guy from a travel agency came in, and we started talking, and by the end of the conversation, he said, I'd really like to talk to you about something. And he wanted to meet my wife and me and wanted us to come into the business. And that seemed like a lot more fun than reprogramming pagers. So, and it was. So it wasn't a hard sell really to get us to go into the travel business. But that was what got us there.
That would have been funny if you were like, no, I think the future is pagers.
That's right. Pagers are definitely the future. These new digital ones are the bomb. So
I like telling this to kids. And because of the skateboards, you'll like this.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in the print shop when I was in high school. We had real clients. One of our biggest client was a pager company. The name of the pager company, Volcom. Volcom.
No kidding.
And I was just like, now, once I started seeing that on T-shirts, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was like, they changed brands. What's going on?
Was there a giveaway table at the pager company?
Yeah, I was like, what did I miss, man? I was like, what's happening? And then I started learning about it. I was like, oh, no, that's not the pager company.
Right.
Back then, I remember there was one point where I had a pager that's really weird. I bought it very cheap in Gatlinburg. Big shocker.
Yeah.
Back then, that was Gatlinburg. And it was, you called into the number and you either hit a number like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and then it would page me whatever that number was, and I would have to remember what that phone number was.
Yeah.
Like that was the version of, I guess, Cricket.
Yep.
But I had that, and I impressed my friends because I gave 5 girls that phone number. So I would just keep it, and I was like, number 3's.
That's right.
Ready to go out. And they were just like, what the hell? They're like, what's number 3 mean? I was like, number 3 is 637. And I would run through the number because I'd have to remember what the hell the number was.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that thing, I can't remember how much that thing cost. It did not cost me much money. But it's hilarious that was a thing.
Oh, the way it worked at all, like the voice pagers, if you remember those, you carried that box on your hip. Well, when somebody would call and leave the message, it just blared out of the... So anybody standing around heard the message. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't anything secretive about it. There was no earplug attached to it. When you pushed that button, the message played. So hopefully it wasn't anything embarrassing. It wasn't, I'm leaving you, and the key's under the mat. And
I'm thinking I would have totally messed with my friends.
How many people would have messed with their friends? Exactly. But there was nothing secretive about it. It just came over that box and anybody could hear it. So I'm sure a lot of people got used to not answering until they were in their car or something like that.
There was even a time I remember, and it's weird talking to kids now, which I had a meeting with a guy earlier, and he was like, well, how old are you? And I told him, he was like, you're a young buck. I was like, no, I'm not. I deal with 25-year-olds. I am not a young buck.
That's funny.
I was like, here's why I'm not a young buck. I had a wallet that my dad gave me when I was in high school, and when you opened it up as a trifold, on the inside where the money was, there were 2 pockets that went down for quarters. And I used to keep quarters in there in case I needed to use a payphone.
That's right.
Or dimes. I remember what was dimes. Like, so when somebody's saying you're a young buck, I was like, no, I remember payphones. Payphones are not a young buck thing.
Wallets used to have pictures in them. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Now it's all my friends have those little thin wallet thing. Mm-hmm. I still have the big old George Costanza wallet. I was like, I got business cards. I got my insurance stuff. I've got a little bit of money, but I was like, I've got Band-Aids. My dad raised me to carry shit in my wallet. I can't get rid of it. Like,
that's funny.
I cut myself too much not to have Band-Aids. And you're saying that about the running into the guys. So a friend of mine, she went to college, got a degree in music, then went and got a master's in science fiction writing, and got out and was like, should I go for a PhD? Like, trying to figure out what to do, when all of a sudden she got a knock on her door, and it was a guy from Edward Jones who had opened this down Madisonville, who's opening up an Edward Jones division there in Madisonville, the first one, and he was just going door to door to introduce himself. And she was like, do you need an assistant? He was like, yeah, I could use an assistant. She's like, good, I'll be there on Monday. And now she has her own office in Maryville.
That's incredible.
Edward Jones. I was like, but those weird encounters, like,
oh, absolutely.
had she been away, she would.
who knows what you'd be doing. God love you, Cher. I don't know what you'd be doing with a master's in science fiction writing. But yeah, hearing that about the travel agent, that's wild. So you signed up, Adrian Cronauer. So I assume you said Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So you went through basic, and was your immediate first station somewhere else other than the States?
Oh, yeah.
Did they honor that?
That really is the point of the job. If you're a radio and TV broadcaster, your job is to be English-speaking media in countries that wouldn't have it naturally. So you're not needed stateside, but overseas on a military base, you would have your Armed Forces radio and television detachment.
Yeah.
In bigger places where you had more bases in Germany and Italy, you would have smaller satellite, almost like affiliate stations, and then in some of the bigger German-based cities, that would be like the main hub, and everything would come and flow from there. But my first assignment was to Naval Air Station Keflavik, and the reason it was an Air Force assignment is that's a NATO base, or was a NATO base. So you had Army there, you had a certain amount of Air Force there, because this was all Cold War stuff. Iceland is a straight shot to the northern side of Russia, so we had bombers, we had fighters, and those kind of missions going on. So you had a number of different services, and services from other countries were stationed there too.
Okay.
And so that was my first assignment, was a couple of years in Iceland. Yeah.
Because I know Desert Storm did not last that long. Was it already done by the time you were out of basic, or was it still?
No, it was still going on, and really led into Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and
Desert
other things
Shield,
came after that. So there really hasn't been a time where there wasn't something going on.
I've got some trading cards in there from Desert Storm that I remember picking up at the Walgreens on Broadway.
Right.
I was like, oh, I got a Schwarzkopf. I should dig those out like that. I remember collecting those when I was a kid, and it never, like I said off mic. So my grandfather grew up pretty tough. I always get these numbers wrong, but I'm in the general area. His dad was married 5 or 6 times and had 20-something kids. And the range in age, and the only way I can remember is at one point, the oldest one was 100, and the youngest one was 54. So there's 46 years difference between the oldest and the youngest.
My gosh.
Yeah. So my grandfather was, I think he had one direct brother and one direct sister. No, not half. Like they were of the same mom. And him and his brother Hank were kind of rough. And World War II broke out. And then that's his flag, his picture, and his medals up there where he joined before he got drafted, because that's what happened with my dad and my uncles too when Vietnam broke out.
Sure.
But he joined, he went and fought in the Pacific. And he never talked about it. The only thing he ever told me was, if you ever get a chance to go to Australia, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. And that was from this big, scary, tough guy that didn't talk that much.
Yeah.
And he was just like, no, that was one. And I've seen pictures of him. Like, that's a picture of him. I think that's in Australia right before they went to the Pacific. But yeah, then he came back and he was like, I'm going to get married and have kids. He straightened out after that because he saw some horrific shit in the Pacific.
That's great.
And then when, like, my dad has a brother 2 years older, him, and then he had a younger brother that was 1 year old, 1 year younger. So it's Tom, Rock, my dad, and Doc. Tom, Rock, and Doc, the boys. That's what they're, even like our extended family in Kentucky who are on my grandmother's side, they're like, oh, that's the Collins boys. Like, they're all 70-something.
Yeah.
But same thing, Vietnam broke out, and they all enlisted before they got drafted. And for some reason, my Uncle Tom went over and been over for like a year. My Uncle Doc went before my dad for some reason. He was in the Air Force. Tom was in the Army. And Dad, when it came time for him to go, my grandmother said no. And her and her pastor wrote to John Duncan Sr., and said, you already have 2 of my boys. And they were in hairy places.
Right.
Like the stories that come out of the, I will tell you too, if I hate to keep going, but it's just, I've never like told their stories on here, and
Sure.
it's kind of wild. Like, and her and her pastor wrote John Duncan Sr. said, "You can't have all three of my boys. Like, you can't do this." Like, they were all big guys, but my
Yeah.
grandmother, 5
Yeah.
foot tall, 100 pound, was the toughest one of them. And so he ended up being a chaplain's assistant in Korea instead. Thank God, because who knows if I would be here right now.
Right.
If he hadn't
Exactly.
gotten to do that. My Tom fought, and he was in charge of the motor pool, and he showed me his card, and it was stapled, and it like rolled out. And I was looking at one day, he's like, "These are all the vehicles I was allowed to drive." And I looked, I was like, "That says tank." And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Did you know how to drive a tank?" "Nah, but I'd have figured it out." But he was stationed in Tet and got transferred a week or two before Tet of 68 happened. So same thing. He may have not been like,
Yeah.
and he told a story about he was over there. They were under fire. I love this story because of the general and there was a guy from West Point, a lieutenant, who was kind of a snot-nosed kid, and they got a trench. They were in a trench because it was just gunfire everywhere, and all of a sudden this helicopter flew around and landed, and out walked this general, and he was like, "I just watched that, man. Bullets were going past." It was almost like he had a force field on, and he walked up to the trench, and he was like, "Who's the motherfucker?" And just started cussing. "Who is in charge? Why are we not fighting?" Like, just every other word was the F word. And my uncle went and said, "That him. It's him. It's him." And he said, "Get your fuck!" He just started yelling at that guy. He's like, "Start returning fire!" Like, just yelling at that guy. And my uncle was like, "I told him. I told him." and he said that guy turned around, walked back, got in his helicopter, and left. Never a bullet hit. I was like, that's insane. Like,
Yeah.
that's shit out of a movie.
Yeah.
And I got to learn what the term FNG meant when I was like 6.
Yep.
Dad, we were somewhere, and Dad went, "That's a bunch of FNGs." And I was like, "What's that mean?" And my uncle from the back said, "Fucking new guys." I was
That's
like,
exactly
Dad was
right.
like, looked at me, he's like, "Don't tell your mama." And then Uncle Doc, he was in the Air Force, and he was in a valley. And he said when he went in, he was the only one, and the pilot was like, "When I land, I'm not going to stop. You're going to jump out the back and run. And that's what you're going to do." And so he did. He landed, and snipers. And he threw the mail out one side that they'd pick up later, and he just turned around and took off again.
Wow.
And my uncle told the story that him and his buddy T used to love. He's like, we'd get lawn chairs, beer, and cigarettes. And we'd love to just sit there and watch it happen, because every time you started to hear the plane, pew, one bullet. And then it would just bam, 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 and you'd watch the dude run.
Wow.
And he was like he said the most impressed he ever was the Korean Army came in to pick up, why am I blanking on? North Vietnamese, the prisoners.
Okay.
And he said, I'm not kidding. They all looked immaculate, perfect. When they all raised their feet, he's like, I guarantee you, I could have gotten down there with a level, and they would have all been the exact. He was like, he's like, there I am in like beard, scraggling beard, drinking beer, and going, yeah, you can take these guys, and they're all just perfect in line. He was like,
That's
it's
so
the most
funny.
crazy thing I've ever seen. But yeah, Dad's favorite story about back then is he was in Korea, and he got hungry one night. My grandfather, I told you, he had to have something sweet, but he would also, at 10 o'clock every night, he'd have to have a snack. So he'd get like saltine crackers and peanut butter. And so my dad got hungry one night, and he went into the mess, and he found a can of peanut butter that was just this massive thing. He's like, oh, shit, I didn't know this was here. So he just set up, found some saltine crackers. He said all of a sudden somebody had opened the door and go, hey, what the hell are you doing? Is that peanut butter? He said by the time they were done, there were like 10 people in there just eating this damn thing. That was it, yeah. But yeah, so but like when I turned 18 in 96, so there was kind of nothing going on. And I think everybody in the family by that point was like, we're good. And even when 9/11, here we're a day before 9/11. When 9/11 happened, my Uncle Doc, my cousin Ryan, was I think 16 or 17. And I just remember sitting up at my grandparents' house and my Uncle Doc going, he's not going. It's like, this is some bullshit. Like, he was so, like, fed up and angry at that point. He was like, no, they can't take my boy.
Right.
Like, he was just so frustrated at what was happening, I think. And that was like 2000, I think that was still 2001, maybe 2002. He's like, I don't think they're going to do the right thing. I think we're going to get stuck. Everything he said was exactly correct.
Yeah.
He's like, and he was like, I can't do that. And also my cousin Ryan, even though God love you, hey Ryan, I love you, but you're like 34 and you still collect pop figures. I know I collect pop figures, but you're still young. You're still young.
That's right.
That. Yeah. But yeah, so it's been wild, but it's interesting growing up around all them because I also have uncles, air quotes, that all, like one of them, little guy that he did 2 things in Vietnam. He would be the guy that would go in the tunnels with a handgun and a flashlight. And then I found out in the last 2 years that he used to check for mines.
Wow.
Like I was like, how you are not dead? I don't know. Like, and he would talk. They finally started talking about stuff when we were in high school, when I was in high school. And we left Quincy's here on Broadway one day before UT game, and Dad said, they ain't never talked about that shit before. He was like, I didn't know it was that bad. And that was his brothers that for 20 years never said a word. Like, so that's my experience. Like,
well, and it's actually a very common experience because a lot of people will tell you that parents, family members that have served before, you just have this feeling that either people wouldn't understand or they don't care or they don't want to bring it back up and talk about it over again. And I knew my dad had been in World War II. I knew what he did, but he never really talked about what he did to any great detail until I joined the military. And then we had a very common language where we could talk about, even though generations apart, he could still very much relate to things that I had been through because a lot of things hadn't changed very much at all. When they walked into the barracks, when I went through basic training on graduation day, they kind of laughed. My dad did because it looked so much in many ways like what he had been through. And the surprising thing to me, this is one of the things that I tell anybody that's curious about it. You think of all the war movies you've seen in your life, and he said for him, the most realistic war movie is Biloxi Blues.
okay.
And he said the reason why is if you listen carefully, you'll catch at the very end where what seemed like they were there in Biloxi, and you know the movie, it seemed like they were there for a long time. In those days, basic training was only a couple of weeks. They had to get you there, get you in processed, make sure that you were in somewhat decent physical shape, get you in uniforms, get you to understand what basic rank was, and then they had to get you into the war. So basic training was really, really short. But the way the bunks were set up in the barracks, the way that they had to do everything so fast with no explanation and a whole lot of yelling and everything, he said that's probably the closest he's seen to what it was really like when he went through, because he said for him, basic was like 2 or 3 weeks. It was really, really fast because then you had to go, in his case, to your aviation school, and then he was going to be a radioman and a gunner, so he had to go to radio school, and he had a bunch of schools, but they've got to get you through there as quickly as possible because they need to get you to the war. And so it's funny when you think of all the John Wayne war movies and all these kind of, and for him, one that he just really enjoyed was Biloxi Blues because he said that's a part of what he really remembers.
That's great. Because I was just thinking of before he was in Full Metal Jacket, Arlie Ermy was in a film called The Boys in Company C, which is this weird movie from like, I think late 70s. And he's exactly what he is in that. Yeah. But, and he uses some language I do not care for. But it's within the, in basic, in the company that he's training, there's a white guy that's kind of pampered from college or whatever, and then there's a black dude who's from like Detroit or Chicago, he used the N-word on that guy a lot, to where it's like, whew, oh, I can't get through. This is tough, man.
Yeah.
I can't handle it. But there's a point he said something in it, and I asked somebody I knew, used to know, and he said to the black guy, he was like, because he was, in rough areas, he was like, I'm trying to get you to be a leader because you know how to deal with this shit already, whereas that college kid is going to scare the shit out of him.
Yeah.
And it was a Vietnam movie. They ended up playing soccer it's a weird movie. But that little point, I was like, oh yeah, like you have almost like that guy had almost like a shortcut. And I think I asked somebody about that, and they were like, oh yeah, that was totally true. Like you had some tough kid out of New York, you tried to get emboldened, I think, because it was just a different mentality or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know. And I wrote down movies because I was like, I think anytime I've heard anybody talk, they say the basic in Full Metal Jacket is pretty damn close.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
And amazing. So Air Force was kind of derived off of Good Morning Vietnam. Ish.
You mean getting me there?
Yeah. Because he was Air Force, right?
He was.
That's what I thought.
And the part that really drove it, and this is an even crazier coincidence, in Richmond, Virginia, they used to have a real smart moment where a lawyer in town would lease a television channel from 6 or 7 o'clock at night till 10 o'clock at night, and it was in the main lineup. So it wasn't like channel 300. It was like channel 27. It was right in the lineup. And he called it Blab TV, Basic Local Audience Broadcasting.
Huh.
And what he would do with it is find companies, and he would build television shows around their businesses. They were all live call-in talk shows. So he would get a local hospital to do a medical show, and you could call in and ask questions, or you could call in to the law show and talk to lawyers. And they had a NASCAR show and cooking shows, and they had all these different things. And part of the charm of it was similar to part of the charm of college radio. The people that were on, they were professionals in their field, but they weren't broadcasting professionals. Yeah. So sometimes it was a little hokey and a little corny, but it was always great information. I mean, you're talking directly to a doctor. You're talking directly to a lawyer. So it was pretty cool. And I just one day called that station up, and I said, I'm just really curious about how you do this. What do you do? And the bottom line for me was a half hour of primetime television cost the same $600 that it cost to run like a 3x3 ad in the Sunday paper to promote a cruise or something like that. And we talked about it, and they said, we would love to help you put together a show. So we put together a 30-minute travel show. And I would get the different cruise lines to come in, and each time we would talk about a different cruise line, and people could call in and ask all these questions. And when the travel agency wasn't going to work out anymore, it had really spurred an interest in, well, maybe I could actually do this. I mean, this was kind of fun. The broadcasting thing was neat, and I enjoyed it. But it really did give me a boost to think that, wow, what would it be like if somebody actually taught me how to do it instead of just kind of winging it based off of what these folks were telling me to do. And so I had a little bit of ammunition to go with when I went into the recruiting office, but I kind of had an idea of what a broadcaster was supposed to be, where you would go to do it, and it just really checked a lot of boxes for what my wife and I thought we might want to do with our lives, and it really wasn't a hard choice. I mean, once they said, this is what it's all about, we went, this sounds cool, let's go do it. I had no clue how long I was going to do it. You know, typical enlistment's 4 years, and I thought, okay, we can do 4 years. Let's go check it out. Had no idea what it was going to turn into after that.
Wow. Hey, was your dad, did he do that for his life, or did he just do it during World War II? And then...
He did just the war.
Okay.
Where he lived in North Carolina, it was, you know, like everywhere else in America, it was just a matter of time. You were going to get drafted. And he and some of the cousins and some of the buddies, they said, if we just go, then we can pick where we're going to go.
Oh, yeah.
And so they went and enlisted in the Army Air Corps, as it was called then. And he scored well on tests, ended up on B-24Js most of his career. He was there for the entire war. 2 plane crashes, one he didn't get hurt in, one he did get hurt in. He's got those stories. The thing that amazes me when you talk to veterans of wars, I don't care which one it is, everybody has those missed it by that much stories to where they're still talking to you today because of where they were standing at that moment. And the real eye-opener for me, talking to my dad once we started talking about how this all worked, he said, you would typically go overseas, you would do 25 combat missions, and then you would come back. If you've ever watched the Memphis Belle, they were making sure those boys made it to that 25th mission because everybody else was getting slaughtered out there. And I said, I must be reading this wrong. I said, 25 missions doesn't seem that long. I said, why did it take so long to do 25 missions? And he explained how squadrons rotate, how often you fly, what it takes to go in and do the missions. And he said, when we'd go out and fly, we're out there for hours. And he said, but you're thinking of it in terms of seconds because every second something is just about to drop out of the clouds and start shooting at you. Yeah. And his position in the plane was between the tail and the wing. There's a hole right in the side, and they're called waist gunners, like the waist of the airplane. That's where he was. So going out, there's radio communications, they're talking, all these things are going on. Once they get into where things start happening, you go radio silent, and then you start firing a gun instead. And it's a 50 caliber machine gun sticking right out of the side. And he's just telling me one day that they're doing their thing. Planes are coming in, they're shooting, and you've seen, just like in the movies, the big belt of the ammunition that's coming out of the box that's feeding into the side of the machine gun, and the last little bit of it goes out. And just as the last bit of ammunition clears that box, he hears this print-a-ling kind of sound, and he looks up, and there's holes in the plane above him, and he looks down into that box, and there's holes through the box. And he said, so now you get a feel for how long we were out there. In a matter of seconds, that box could have been full of bullets if it had happened a few seconds earlier, and that could have blown up right in front of him. Jeez. He said, or another 2 or 3 seconds, and I would have been leaned over to pick that box up to go get another one, so that line of bullets, instead of going through the top of the plane, would have split him in half. So you start to get a real appreciation for the fact that they went out and did this 25 times for many, many hours on end.
Well, and the other thing is, they're kids.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
When you think about it now as an adult, you're like, oh, they were kids.
The pilots were like the old men. They were like 23. They were captains, and they were 23. And you've got guys all around you that are, on average, 18 or 19. We had a cousin, cousin JT. He hated that all the older cousins went off and left, and his mother lied on the 17 age exemption, and he went to the Navy when he was 16 years old. He was a seasoned combat veteran back home again before he turned 18.
Before he could legally drink a beer.
Yes. He had already been there, done that, and come back home. Jeez. Got home for a while and turned right around and re-enlisted in the Air Force, and he made a career of it. He did the full stint.
You saying that about the mist thing made me remember that there's this guy I worked with. This would have been mid to late 90s at a print shop, that he had served. I'm trying to remember. I think he served like 10 years. Like, he didn't do the full lifer thing, but he also didn't. And I think he was in Desert Storm, but he said he remember being on some big, like 50 cal or something. And he said, and he just remembers at some point he heard something and he looked at the guy next to him. And right as he looked over, something jammed and a piece of it flew off, and he got to watch it slice the guy's head in half. And he got to see that 5 feet from him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and the same thing, like, what if I had been on that gun and not this gun?
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
it's insane. Like, how many of those? And then to think about it, that they're the kids thing is dumb. I say that, you'll see why I mean dumb. It's not dumb, but there was years ago where I was at a UT football game and I was getting upset that they were not doing good. And then it finally clicked. Because I was like 30. I was like, they're like 18. Shut up. They're kids.
That's right.
They're just kids.
That's right.
Leave them
2
alone.
years ago, they were getting their driver's license, and now you're yelling at them because
They can't
they're not
complete a
playing
pass.
like Super Bowl champions. Yeah,
So anytime I think about stuff like that, it's like, anybody under the age of 25, that's a kid.
that's exactly right.
That's a kid.
Yep. Very good.
And I've heard Tom Hanks, it's one of my favorite interviews. It was for Castaway. Tom Hanks was on shooting Charlie Rose.
Okay.
It's a great interview, but he was talking about, making Saving Private Ryan and stuff, and Charlie Rose said, if there's anything you could do different, go back in time and do different, what would you do? He was like, I would have joined the military. He's like, because when I was young, he's like, my dad and all their friends, they all served in World War II, or, they fought.
Sure.
And he said, and then he was like, it's the simple things of like, we would go and go camping, and the way they would set up a tent, they just knew how to do it. They just did it. Because it was just like ingrained in them to just do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't have that. And he was like, you know who else said that to me? Bill Clinton. He was like, I wish I would have served. I wish I went in the Dodge. And he said, that would have made me a better human being if I had served. I was like, holy, thanks, Tom Hanks, for making me feel like an asshole. Like, I think, and it's weird. Like,
Thank you for your non-service.
yeah, bastard. But I think undereducated and overstimulated, I guess is a good way to put it. Because I would read books like crazy, and I'd research and all that. And I remember, since we're a day away, I remember when 9/11 happened. I remember sitting there at my job and going, for a week, I was like, should I enlist? Should it, because I was 20, 21.
Many people thought exactly the same thing and did. Or didn't, but that was the conversation for many
And the
people.
only reason I didn't is because I thought, I don't know that we're going to go after the right people. I think this changes the game on warfare, is what this, just from all the reading and talking to
Sure.
my dad and uncles and grandfather. Well, not my grandfather. He didn't talk about shit. He didn't. That's one big regret in my life. He died when I was, I think, 19. And he and I were just starting to get close. And he died of like his third heart attack. And it was just like, shit. It's like I would take anything, have anything to go back and have a year to just sit down and do shit like this with him. Like just talk to him and make him talk instead of just, I'm going to the basement to work on my keys. He did keys. But I didn't think we were going to go. And I have a sister that's 11 and a half years younger than me. And I was like, I can't. I was too involved in her life.
Yeah.
It's like, I just can't. And I don't think I've ever told my mom and dad that. I told my cousin that recently, but I was like, no, there was a good week where I honestly thought about it because I was the right age, and I don't know if I'm an asshole for not doing it,
No, not at all.
or just
Not at all. That's why they call it a volunteer military. It's so that you do have that choice. There's no obligation. There's no people who it drives them to it. It ends up being what they do, and people join for a million different reasons. People join because they feel maybe a new or a newfound sense of patriotism, and that's what happened after 9/11. Many people felt like they needed to serve. Many people come for purely personal reasons. They need the job. They want to learn a job. They want to learn a profession. One of the different things about joining the military that a lot of people don't think of is every other job in the world that you go to, they say, what is your experience? What is your background? The military is one of the few places where when you show up, they say, what can we teach you? What would you like to be doing? And they'll send you to amazing schools to teach you how to do amazing things, and a lot of people join because of that. The education benefits, the idea of an adventure and travel, and eventually, if you stay in long enough, everybody graduates to what I would say the true patriotism level of serving. It really does become a part of what you do, that you're living a service-driven life, to where you are not working on a profit margin. You're not working on how many things get sold. You're going to work for the betterment of your state or your country or your agency or whatever you're working for. But there's a lot of reasons why people join. There's a lot of reasons why people don't, and all are the right choice. It's not a thing that anyone should ever feel like I should have or I missed out. It's, if you were supposed to be there, I firmly believe you would have been there.
And it's one of those, had they done a draft or anything, I would never hesitated. I would never hesitated. It would never been, I'm going to leave. It would be like, no, my grandfather did this before me, and my dad and uncles did this before, after him. It's my time. But I will say something kind of funny. When I was in high school, like I said, print shop, everybody in the vocational department, we had upholstery. It is amazing. I wish they had kept it. Upholstery, woodworking, electrical, auto mechanics, drafting, radio broadcasting, TV broadcasting. And you went through a thing your freshman year, pre-voc, where you took 2 weeks in each class.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. And they still have TV broadcasting. They still have radio broadcasting. They now have graphic design, no longer print shop, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
Sandy.
can pick up Fulton's radio station all the way in Maryville.
It's one of the best radio stations in the city.
Yeah, it's funny.
Amazing.
I wish there was more times where I hear the students on the air. I hear music all the time. They've got some really neat things. I don't know if you've ever visited their station. But
so the guy running it graduated a year before me.
Okay.
A real close friend of mine, Russell Mays. Yeah.
I went out there one day and had a chance to visit their station, and they had a wall full of the old carts, the cartridges.
That's what we did when we were there.
Do you know where those came from?
They look like 8-tracks, but
They look like 8-tracks.
Yeah.
Those were carts that were used at Dolly's radio station, WDLY.
Oh, shit.
And when she stopped doing that, that collection was donated to the Fulton School, and that's where those came
amazing.
from. Those are artifacts. Those are amazing.
I'm gonna tell Russ, because he's eventually gonna come on my radio show, and he tell him, like, never get rid of those.
Okay, well, I'll tell you a quick cart story.
Okay.
So the carts typically are for, and again, you have to think back. And for people that can't picture this in their head, if you've ever held an 8-track cassette in your hand, that's what it looks like. The point of those carts is that you play it, and when it gets to the end, it re-cues, and it's ready to go again all on its own. And you had carts that were 10 seconds long or 30 seconds long, depending on whether you were putting just a jingle or a commercial or maybe a whole song. And overseas, we had different uses for them. Like, you would have a cart that would play for 15 minutes because every day at the end of the news, we would have a thing called the swap shop. So you're trying to sell your lawn furniture. You tell me how much you want for it. And we would have music playing in the background, and I'm saying, and Jody's selling his lawn furniture. It's going to be blah, blah, blah. He wants $25 for it. Call him at this number.
Craigslist before Craigslist.
It's like Craigslist on the radio. Exactly. Well, you also had another cart that every DJ had, and that was your poop tune. Poop tune is a poop tune is an extra long cut of a song, so that when you have to go to the bathroom, you grab your cart, plug it in, and you've got a certain amount of time to go take care of your business and get back on the air.
The doors, the end, the full version.
Perfect example. Well, there was a guy when we were at Lodges Air Force Base. And for people that aren't familiar with that, if you ever look on a map, find Portugal and then start going west out into the ocean, and about 900 miles off the coast, there's a tiny little dot of islands that are the Azores, Azores, little chain of islands. And we had a station there. There was a base there. We were a tenant of a Portuguese Air Force station, basically a gas and go for airplanes going in to the European theater. Well, one of the guys there, his poop tune was Bill Withers, Ain't No Sunshine.
That's like 2 minutes and 13 seconds.
Well, I guess there was a radio cut of it or something, but that was his bathroom break cut. Well, when you went down,
that was one of the first 45s I bought on my own when I was in high school.
Well, when you went down the hallway, you go into the bathroom. There's a speaker in the bathroom so you can hear your song, so you know what's going on. This guy's down there taking care of his business, and he's listening to the song, and he gets to, you know, the famous line in the song, and it's, and I know, 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 I know. So now this guy's freaking out because the cart has obviously gotten stuck, and he's gathering himself together, pulling his pants up, getting cleaned up. He goes flying down the hall, and he runs around the corner. Half the station is standing there. They had taken his cart and re-recorded it in a loop, so this song was intentionally messed up. This guy's freaking out, thinking that he had best use of a cart I've ever heard in my life. And from then on, anytime somebody would play that song in an oldie show or something, you'd hear people walking up and down the hall going, I know, I know, I know, I know, because they got that guy so good. And that's always what I remember when I see a stack of old carts somewhere is Bill Withers. But,
You seen that about the poop tune? You're the first person. Like, this was after my grandfather died. I was helping my grandmother with a yard sale, and it was early in the morning. I was angry at having to be up super early. I think I was still in college, and she, maybe right after college, but she went upstairs to do something, and I had 98.7 The X, which was a new station at that point. It was modern and classic rock. Mm-hmm. They were great when they came out because they would play deep cuts of like Zeppelin and Leonard Skinner, songs you never. IMZ played the same 3 songs. So all of a sudden I was like, wait, who is this? Oh, that's Led Zeppelin. Oh, yeah, I'm used to hearing the same 3 songs over and over. Rock and Roll, Black Dog, not even Stairway, because Stairway was too long.
Right.
But they would mix it in with like Pearl Jam and Tool and Marilyn Manson and all the modern stuff. But I was sitting there and I had the radio on, and all of a sudden the guy said, all right, coming up next is Tool with H, because I got to go take a dump. He hit play, and you hear it starting. He was like, in case you missed that, I got to go use the bathroom.
Oh, my gosh.
See you in 12 minutes.
Oh, my gosh.
And I was like, oh, my God. I was like, thank God she's not down here. She would have murdered me.
That is hilarious.
But, yeah, that's the first time.
He owned it. I've never heard anybody that just owned it.
Yeah. He's like, I was like, yeah, you could have. They probably did not want you playing that song. May have not even, probably had the cuss words still in it. But he was like, no, I got to go. I got to go. It's like, that's amazing. Vocational, they had everybody in the vocational take a test called the Voc Rehab test. And it was aptitude for military. Mm-hmm. That's what it was for. So I took it. I apparently did very well. God knows how I did well, because all I took was like art and print shop. That's I barely got out of high school, and I did so well. They're like, we're going to have you take this nuclear physics test. I was like, good luck with that. So I went down. There were 3 of us that took that nuclear physics test. I think the most you could score on it was like a 56, and I scored like a 38 or a 42. And they're like, who are you? What are you? I was like, I literally guessed. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And the Air Force and the Navy recruited the hell out of me.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Army never came close to me, but the Air Force and Navy. And I can't remember which one was. I think it was the Navy. They kept sending me letters, kept calling and all that stuff. And then one day I was home alone, and I was only 17 when I graduated high school. And I opened the door. I was 6'6", 330. And I opened the door, and it was a guy either from the Air Force or Navy. I think it was the Air Force. And he said, I'm here to see Jody Collins. I was like, that's me. And he's like, that's not going to work. And I was like, what? He's like, you're too big for us. And I was like, for who? And he was like, oh, I'm with the Air Force. You're over the limit. We can't have you. I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
And then Navy called me, and I said, I might be over your limit. And they're like, how big are you? I was like, 6'6", 330. And they're like, oh, no, never mind. And they stopped calling, stopped mailing me. And so for all this time, I was like, apparently there's a limit.
Wow.
You can go. And I always said, well, but David Robbins. I said that to one of my friends. He's like, dumbass, David Robbins was also a much better basketball player than you.
Right.
If you could play basketball like David Robinson, you would have been in the Air Force,
right,
or the Navy.
Yeah,
Navy. I think he was Navy.
He was Navy.
Yeah. But I still think about that. I was like, I don't know how I did so well. Just B, C, D, B, A. Sure. All sounds good to me. Took that test. But yeah, ever since, that still cracked me up, that guy showing up and opening the door.
Wow.
Like, you're not going to do. You're not going to do. I was like, I don't know what the limit is. I don't know what the high. Same time I was getting recruited by a art college in West Tennessee called Nassau. And forever I was like, oh, must be really talented. And then I found out in the last 5 years, like, no, it costs $25,000 a year to go there. They wanted my money.
Oh, of course they did.
They saw that I went all the way up to like Art 6 in high school, and they're like, he's a sucker. He'll do this. And tried like hell to get me, but no, that wasn't going to happen. Yeah, I was a poor kid. It was funny. My parents both worked a lot. And so like I went to my own parent-teacher conference one year and got yelled at by an English teacher. She's like, where's your mom and dad? I was like, Mom's probably on her way home from work and taking care of my little sister, and Dad, he'll still be at work till midnight. She's like, what are you doing here? I was like, curious to hear how I'm doing. And she's like, you need to leave my class. And I went down the print shop. Mr. Miracle was like, what are you doing down here? I was like, I was just bored. And he was like, all right, you want to go get some work done? Like, yeah, that sounds good. So I went in the back and started printing stuff on the press.
Funny.
It's like, yeah, we'll do whatever we do. So your dad served, and you started talking to him. I don't want to say, was that good? Like, he really, like, opened up of, like, yeah, this is what happened. And
Yeah, but not in the sense of, it wasn't like he came home traumatized and didn't want to talk about it. He was always a happy guy. It was never anything like that. But he was one of these guys that you couldn't come up with a topic that he somehow didn't know something about. To this day, he's still the smartest person I ever knew. Extremely well-read. But he was just a modest guy, and he just thought, who am I going to talk with about this stuff? Because one, he didn't think anybody cared to hear about it. But two, who is he going to talk to that can even relate to it? I mean, in his mind, a war story isn't any good if people don't understand what he's talking about.
Right.
And, he had all sorts of, like, scrapbooks that it was just where they're in Italy and that's where they were stationed. And so when they'd go into the villages, they'd take pictures of the people, and he had those kind of neat things. And people knew about those. My sisters and my mom, of course, knew about those. But in terms of just talking about a military life, he just never really talked about it until I guess he felt like somebody cared. And he just had so many just cool little stories of things that, I'd find a picture, and it's a picture of them sitting around this kind of funky Christmas tree. And I said, well, what's the deal with the Christmas tree? And, Mom and Dad would get that huge grin on their face, and they'd say, oh, that was our first Christmas when we were at Eglin Field in Florida, and we didn't have enough money to really decorate a tree, so we got this scrub little tree, and your dad went to like where they threw out the wires and the light bulbs and things that they would put in the control panels of the airplanes. He'd get like the discarded stuff, resolder it, and so he made the Christmas lights out of discarded lights from the aircraft. And I don't know if you're familiar with chaff, but if you can imagine wires about a foot long that have just almost like tinsel type shards of metal hanging off of it. And what that was for is when people were trying to find you in the air with radar and stuff, you would throw this stuff through a little hole out of the side of the plane, and all that metal in the air would kind of scramble radar and anything trying to locate you. He brought home handfuls of that and then bent it with pliers, and he hung that on the tree like tinsel and ornaments.
That's amazing.
And you look at it, and I just see that picture, and when you know what it is, it's just the most beautiful thing in the world.
Yeah.
But when they talk about those times, it was warm times. That's when my sister was born. My other sister was born in Chicago. And so they grew up kind of military, but it wasn't too long after those years that my dad got out. they had even offered him an officer's commission. They wanted to train him to be a navigator. And in those days, you could get a much more direct commissioning. You didn't necessarily have to have a college degree. If you had the aptitude, they would let you take a shot at it. And they wanted him to do it, but he knew he'd done his time. He knew he had done everything he wanted to do. And the last thing he wanted was to go back overseas and do another 24, 25 combat missions. And so once he got home, he did a few more years stateside, and then they were done. But he never had any kind of trauma about it, which really surprised me later because, inevitably, if it's about airplanes, you ask your dad, were you ever in any crashes or anything like that? And he was in a crash overseas, and they slid into a safe place, and nobody got hurt. They belly slid in. Everything was fine. But in Alamogordo, New Mexico, they were doing some flying there, and something happened, and they just didn't manage to miss the mountain, and they flew right into the side of the mountain, and a bunch of his friends got killed. A number of the crew seriously injured. He was hurt really bad, and that was a rough one. And I don't know what it was about their resilience or their toughness back in those days, but he never had any issues about that. It was bad, and it happened, and you dust yourself off and you get back to it, and he was fine. So anytime he ever told me about the military, his experiences, even the combat stuff. I mean, I've got a little notebook where he wrote up every one of their missions, and some days it was pretty bad, but I don't know. It didn't affect him the way that it still affects some people, and similar story. Not to get too far off topic, but
go for it.
When they talk about people that are taken prisoner, you have an obligation to resist as much as you can. And you say, well, what does that mean? And you say, well, it's different for every person.
Right.
Some people resist for about 2 minutes, and then that's it. That is they are scared to death, and that's their level of resistance. And other people, you could do just about anything to them, and they weren't going to crack. They weren't going to have those problems. Yeah. But that's an individual thing, and there was no way to really gauge that. And God bless him, he was fine. And just little things that about that experience that I always loved and appreciated. I'll never forget, I got to meet some of the older guys who were Tuskegee Airmen. And when I met them, I said, just wanted to shake your hand. I'm alive because of you. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, my dad was in bombers in World War II. And they'd get a smile on their face, and they'd go, oh, so if we hadn't taken care of your dad, I'd say, exactly, then I wouldn't be here. And Dad said that on many of their missions, it was Tuskegee Airmen, and you could tell from the red tails on the planes, those were the guys that would escort them out. And they were amazing, and they did incredible jobs. And so in all seriousness, I'm probably here because of those guys.
Yeah, all this thing about like the Redskins changing their name, why it's not the Red Tails or something.
That would be awesome.
Like, I saw that list of names. I was like, what the hell are you doing? Yeah. You've literally got a name, same letters. If I think Tails, Skins, yeah.
Oh,
like it's a no-brainer to me.
It
like,
could be a great tribute. It could be really, really cool.
You saying that made me think. Don't know how big of a movie nerd you are, but they're about to do you remember The Rocketeer?
Mm-hmm.
So they're about to do a new version of it, but going back and having the guy who has the pack be a Tuskegee Airman instead. And I was like, that's going to be, and I think it's going to be on Disney Plus. It may be a TV series, not a movie. I was like, that could be fascinating. Like, I can't wait I love The Rocketeer.
Yeah.
It's a very,
I love the comic book and the movie. I thought they did great with both of them.
Very unheralded movie that doesn't get enough credit. And also Jennifer Connelly in that movie may be the most beautiful woman at that. Oh God. Okay. You said comic books. So that reminds me, like, Dad, in there I have 40 to 50 long boxes of comics. And the only reason I got into comics is because when Dad served, they would give him comics. So I have all of his old comics, which were like early Amazing Spider-Man, or, and there was one, he showed me a picture where he would cut them up and hang them up on the wall in the barracks. And there was one, I was like, damn it. that's the first appearance of the Punisher, and you cut it up and hang it on your damn wall, Dad. That thing's worth a lot of money, Dad. And he was like, hell, I just wanted to see the pictures.
But see, that's what made them collectible, was guys back then that just cut them all up instead of every issue of every comic book and every cover design all being saved now. Well, that's great, but now they're not worth anything because everybody saves them now.
Yes.
So,
and there's a comic, I don't know if it's called Truth, and it's the guy Kyle Barker. It was like, if Captain America really happened, they wouldn't just plug that serum into a white guy. So it goes into like the Tuskegee experiment, and actually the TV series Falcon and the Winter Soldier, there's a guy in it who was the main character in the Truth comic. And I was like,
okay,
I love that you're deep diving on the geekdom. And I remember when that comic came out, and there were a lot of people that did not like it coming out. And I think it was like 2003, 2004. It's like, what is wrong with you all? Of course this is what shut up. We're past, it's 2003 and you're, shut up. But it's also a great comic. So you said where you went for the first part of your service.
Mm-hmm.
So did you get to move and change that and get to travel and see the world?
Well, we did. Again, the first assignment was in Iceland. We were there for 2 years, and you really do get to travel.
Oh, I was going to say, before I forget, there's a band called Sigur Rós.
Mm-hmm.
So they released a documentary after they had blown up big called, I've got somewhere, Heima, Heima, where they went back to Iceland and played like just almost like neighborhood shows.
Yeah.
And it is, you might check it out because it is gorgeous to watch. I think they're about to re-release it in like 4K and stuff, so you'll be able to see it on.
Oh, it's a spectacular place.
I think it's on Amazon right now.
If we could have lived off base, we probably would have ended up dual citizens because we loved living in that country. We loved the Icelandic people. We probably saw in some form or fashion about 3/4 of the country, just because, and that's not hard to do because Iceland's about the size of Kentucky. I mean, it's not hard to see a lot of it, except for the fact that a lot of it isn't paved. There aren't roads.
Right.
You've got a gigantic glacier right in the middle of it, and we would just get out all the time, everywhere we could, and we did that anyway.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, being in the military, the work will take you to other places. And one of my favorite phrases, and I'd probably been in the military for 20 years before I even knew this, but when military people go on a work trip, it's called a TDY. You're going on a TDY. I never knew what a TDY was, didn't care, didn't know what the phrase was. But somewhere along the line, somebody would make the comment of when they had to go on a military work trip, they had to either travel down yonder or they were on a tour down yonder. So where are you going?
I love that.
I'm tour down yonder. Well, after a while, they would say, I'm going TDY. And eventually, that became a true military phrase. So it really is a TDY now. But travel down yonder is where it comes from. And so you go to a lot of other places to work. The first TDY that I ever went on was a trip that took us to Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, Holland, and I can't remember anywhere else. But so you do get those travel opportunities. And then just the idea that, you know, if you're already living in Iceland, well, when you have vacation time, it's real easy to go to Europe or any place. So we did a lot of that. Anytime we could go somewhere, we would use those opportunities and do the traveling. And I think the last time I counted it, I think I've been to about 25 countries.
Good Lord.
And most of that was work, more so than just going for fun.
Right.
But
when you went for work, did you get to have time off to where you could go and explore the city?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. And one of the things about working in a broadcasting job, which parallels and overlaps and is under the umbrella now of being a public affairs specialist, public affairs, video, photography, stories. When other parts of your base are going somewhere to do things, you get to go with them. And I think that's one of the real blessings of having that kind of work, because I got to be a part of what everybody else was doing on the base. So when our medical team would go somewhere, public affairs people would go and cover what they're doing. So I got to not really live a lot of different military lives, but I got to experience a lot of military lives. So we would go places with our security forces people, or we would, and it wasn't always great conditions or anything like that. I mean, fast forward many years, being in Texas, I went to Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Gustav, Hurricane Dolly, Hurricane Ike, and I'm in a parking lot in a tent for a couple of weeks. And so those kind of things weren't fun. They were austere. They were rough conditions. But I was never in harm's way. I was never in a place where somebody was ever pointing a gun at me. So that's been a very different part of my military career to begin with. It's just where I did end up doing my jobs. But everybody in the military will have some type of opportunities to check that travel box. It's definitely going to be there.
And I'm trying to think how to ask this question without it being the dumbest question I've ever asked on this podcast.
There's no dumb questions, just dumb people, Jody.
Well, I'm a dumb person for asking this. Does that change your outlook on the world? How did that...
That is not a dumb question. That is a wonderful question. And I wish I could remember the...
Because Richmond, Virginia, it's not huge, but it's not small.
No.
It's not like you're coming from Madisonville.
No.
To pick on Greg and Shara a little bit.
No.
But it's
Richmond, I think, in a lot of ways can match up pretty well with Knoxville in terms of you've got a very...
College town,
cosmopolitan in some ways in terms of business and things that are going on. Not really, more countrypolitan, I guess. But Mark Twain has a great quote, and I don't remember any of it, so I'm not even going to try. But it has to do with things like, travel is very dangerous. It ruins. It ruins racism. It ruins narrow-mindedness. It ruins. I can't remember what it is.
My joke forever has been: if you're against gay people, you've never met a gay person. If you're against black people, you've never met a black person.
Right.
Because if you ever had any experience with, you would realize just a person, just like you.
Sure.
There's no magicalness or anything, and any uncomfortableness after about 5 minutes, you'd be like, What the hell was I thinking? What was my problem? It would be about them.
Yeah. And that's what should happen when you travel a lot. And my wife and I have, I'll say we've taken great pride in never being a tourist. We are visitors. And when we visit to learn your culture, love your culture. And in a perfect world to me, you would never be able to pick us out of a crowd in another country. And in Iceland, people would walk up to me with my fair features and start talking to us in Icelandic. And my wife has dark hair, and in Portugal, they would think she was the local and start talking to her. But we would do things like learn how to order food in a restaurant. If you can get past that, you're already on your way. You're not going to learn the language, but if you can learn to just have that restaurant conversation, you're going to be fine. If you can learn subtleties like, for example, in Icelandic, góðan daginn is good day, and somebody that's not paying attention, they would walk in any place, anytime, and say góðan daginn, which is not terrible, except they also have their version of good evening, which is góð nótt. So if you learn góð nótt, well, you've already moved up a notch, because the Icelandic language is very weird. It's a Celtic Scandinavian mix, and they have letters and pronunciations that we don't have. So there's not a one-to-one transfer like the Romance languages. It's very much a unique language that you either know something of it or you don't. And we would get to where we had friendships in other countries, and people would talk with us in ways that maybe they wouldn't talk with people in more casual conversations. And I had a wonderful, wonderful adventure If you look on a map of Iceland, if you look towards the southeast part, a huge part of the country is a glacier. It's the Vatnajökull Glacier. It's the largest glacier in Europe. And a group of our base members that had belonged to some kind of a mountaineering, spelunking kind of club, excuse me, they decided they were going to ski from one side of this glacier to the other, which was going to put them on the glacier for well over a week. And this is cross-country skis with the sleds attached to their hips, taking everything with them. Well, we got to go and shoot stories on them the whole time. So we did stories about preparing to go. We took them to the point where we dropped them off to start the trek. We talked with them by satellite radio during the week. We met them on the other side when they came back. And the guy that was kind of our guide to take us to do this was a guy from our base safety office, Thorgrimur St. Arneson. I'll never forget his name, and that was 30 years ago. That's a great, that's a superhero name in itself. And we are on the glacier, and another vehicle that was with us broke down a little bit, so we couldn't press on much further to where we were headed. So we're spending the night on the glacier, and it's like being in an ocean. There's nothing, there's no point of reference in every direction. It's ice, and we're sleeping in a van, and that's till we head out the next day. That's what we're going to be in. And we're just talking, and he said, I want to ask you something, and I don't know if I can say this without being offensive. And I said, well, probably not. So let's go for it. I mean, you're not going to offend me. So let's go for it. And he said, I've always wondered why Americans kill each other so much. Now that's a head splitter, because to understand the Icelandic culture, it is an extremely homogeneous society. Mm-hmm. They are all Icelandic. There are some people that have moved from other countries, but for the most part, they are Icelanders.
Right.
So they don't have a bad side of town. They don't have radically diverse socioeconomic things going on. They are all Icelanders, and they live very similar lives. And it's not a matter of if you're related, but are you far enough back related that you're not messing up the gene pool when you decide to get married? I mean, and
that sounds very Southern.
Exactly. So I had to think about it. And I said, I can imagine what it must look like for people overseas to look at America and try to wrap their head around what we're about. I said, but we have every single culture in the world. We have every single race. We have every single religion. We have every single level of income. We have every single possible goal, every possible ambition, and we're all jammed in together. And sometimes it just doesn't work. Right. I said, if you lived among us, you would feel very welcome, because there's a whole lot of people that look like you that live there, and there's a whole lot of people that look like anybody from any other country. And I said, I don't think anybody can ever make an excuse for why we kill ourselves and why we do what we do to each other. But the bigger picture is we're also one of the most diverse races in the world that at least tries to make it work. So I was kind of trying to approach it in a way that I felt like I was hopefully answering his question a little bit, with the understanding that I'm talking to a guy that can never truly relate to it just because of where he lives. And he chewed on that for a while, and he kind of accepted that answer. That worked okay. And then I said, okay, so my question for you is, why do you guys hunt whales? And he chewed on that one, and he laughed, and he said, okay, here's the thing. He said, in the first place, it's not like we're out trying to slaughter all the whales in the world. He said, there are other places where they're trying to take care of that by far. He said, if you look at Iceland, you've got your layers of biodiversity of what makes that country work. He said, we are a fishing country. We live off the fish that we catch. In order to have fish to catch, we have to have a certain amount of shrimp and a certain amount of krill and a certain amount of these smaller things for the fish to eat, and by the way that whales eat. He said there's a balance that we understand where if we do catch a whale, it's not that we're doing it for sport. We're not doing it for a fin. He said every single part of that whale is used in a very productive way, just like any other animal or fish that's ever taken. He said it's not that we're out for a slaughter. That's not what this is about. He said, and then the other side of it is, it's a part of our culture. Since the day we were Vikings in every way, this is what we eat. This is what we build part of our homes out of in those days.
And I feel like
kind of thing.
It's almost like the Native American tradition of they don't waste a piece of it either.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And he said, it's hard for us to wrap our head around people getting so upset about us taking a certain number of whales, which I think they have given up all commercial whaling now, but this was close to 30 years ago. But he said, there are a lot of places where we just feel respectfully that we don't have any place putting our nose into business.
Yeah.
And sometimes we really can't figure out why people are so worried why our tiny little country is doing things. He said, we don't sit on the International Railing Commission because we don't have trains. He said, by the same token, there are places around the world that have nothing to do with whales in any way whatsoever and don't even try to understand where we are at the table with whaling. So I don't even know if we came to any considerations on any of that, but we've just always taken the perspective of if you're not interested in doing what these people do in their countries, why are you visiting it? You don't go over and act like that ugly American, just like every other country has their version of ugly that comes over here and they can't figure out why we don't do things like they do there. But my favorite example is we went to Paris for our 25th wedding anniversary, and it was absolute magic. But we did our homework on what do people wear when they're in Paris? What do people do as far as the way they go out to eat? You get a little bit of education, and then when it happens, you are still fitting into the situation better. And just some examples. In Paris, when people are just out knocking around doing their thing, they don't walk around in shorts and a T-shirt and sneakers. That's just not what they do. So
I'm out.
If you want to blend in, as do many, 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 many others.
No, I wear shorts in the wintertime.
Right.
That would murder me.
But that's...
or I'd have to go in the wintertime when I could balance out.
Bundle it up. So to blend in, you wear not necessarily like dress clothes, but you dress a little nicer.
Yeah.
You don't walk around in sneakers. Well, that's a great tip, because then if you're walking around and you walk up to a cafe and there's a lot of people dressed like Americans, that's a tourist stop. You don't want to go there.
Yeah,
you want to go
100%.
down to another stop. When you go into a cafe in the morning, if you haven't done your homework, you're going to think, these are the rudest Parisians that we've heard so much about. That's not what it's about at all. For them, stopping at a cafe in the morning is like our drive-thru for a Starbucks. But they're still going to sit down at a cafe.
Yeah.
So they're going to sit down to have their breakfast. They're going to sit down to have their bread, but they still need it quickly. So when that waiter comes up to your table, he's not being brusque. He's not blowing you off. He's not being rude. It's the morning shift, and people need their stuff quickly to get it happening. So he comes up to the table. You should have an idea of what you want, because he needs you to tell him so he can get your food so that you can get going, because there's another guy that needs to sit there to get his coffee. Once you get that flow, life's great. If you come back to that same cafe at lunch, you can sit there for 3 hours and have lunch, because that's what people do is they sit around and they enjoy the day and they have a leisurely lunch, and then they go back to work till well into the evening. And those kind of tips were really where our eyes were opened on how to just immerse yourself, blend in, love the place for what it is. Don't sit around and look like why it's not like Maryville, Tennessee.
There's a host, and I'm going to put comedian in air quotes, named Chris Hardwick. I'm not I listened to his podcast forever, and I just realized I'm not a big fan of you. Why am I doing this to myself? Because he would always say, anytime he went to another country, the first phrase he would learn was, "Pardon me, I'm a stupid American." And I'm not a big American exceptionalism person, but that always rubbed me wrong. And you just explained that to me. Why? You know why? Because he didn't take the time to learn, and he was like, well, I'm American, so of course I'm stupid. It's like, no, you don't have to be.
And you don't have to do that, because it was a smart thing we did. I'll admit it. It was a smart thing we did.
Yeah.
When we go into Paris, and when I say Paris, there's a whole lot of Paris no one has ever seen before. The parts that you see in Ratatouille. Let's just call it what it is. Ratatouille is actually...
I'm going to say Amelie. Go a little artsier.
Yeah. But it's amazing that we're watching Ratatouille and we would go, we've been there. I mean, that's like hilarious. Really accurate. But when you walk into a restaurant or when you walk into a store, you set the pace for how it's going to go. Because when you walk in, they're going to say bonjour. If you look them in the eye and say bonjour, you're going to have a good day. If you don't answer back, they got nothing for you.
Yeah.
That's just their protocol. That's just the way it goes. So we would walk in and say bonjour. They would say bonjour. They would start speaking to us in French. So I learned the phrase, un problème, je ne parle français. Un petit problème, one small problem. I don't speak French. And they would go, oh, American, that's fine. But just the fact that in their language, I said, sorry, this is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
They were so cool with us. Any place we went, people were so wonderful, so polite, so welcoming that we took that much interest as opposed to just being that, sorry, I'm a dumb American.
Yeah.
And you're right. That guy deserves a smack for that, because you're just saying, I'm going to live up to your absolute lowest expectations. Let's go.
Well, and it's also the thing of, I feel like he thinks he's better than the guy walking in the shorts and the T-shirt. I was like, no, you're no better.
Right.
Because you made no effort to learn.
Exactly.
Like, I looked at going to Paris at one point, and I realized why I found a flight so cheap. It's because it was in the off season. And then I started reading, it was like, 60% of the stuff is going to be closed. So you're going to be stuck. And you may be stuck in miles of town with nothing. Where you're just going to be on your own, man. And I was like, crap. But I was already nervous about like the language and stuff. I was like,
yeah,
I don't want to go over there, but I also don't have a great capacity to learn language at a certain age.
But you just don't have to. You really, if you just kind of fess up and say, basically, I wish I spoke your language, but I don't. And just be polite. Just be that person. And tying this back to, which was originally a military question, I mean, we're taught that to an extent in the military too. Be a good visitor. Don't go in and just be a goof, because you're reflecting in so many ways, not just on you as a military guy, but you are obviously spotted as an American early on. So make it a good experience for everybody. And any place we went, if you went in with that better attitude and that, and it's not even a humble thing. It's just trying to be genuinely courteous.
Yeah.
Even if you don't speak the language, people are going to pick it up from your body language. They're going to pick it up from your tone, how you feel about being there. And we went to Poland. We were there for 2 weeks on a work trip, a TDY, and we picked up so many cues that just people were not only seeing you, but they wanted to talk with you. They wanted to spend time with you. Polish people in general really love Americans. They want to talk to Americans. They want to visit. And it was almost like out of war movies where we would get back from where we were working, and we were staying in one of the cities. And no kidding, grandmothers would drag grandkids right up to us to shake our hands. And they would jabber away in Polish, and we would have no clue what they were saying. But you would learn things like, please, thank you, hello, just some of the very basic greetings and things. And that would go so far. But the best example I can give you of where you can make those impressions and where you really get your head open to other countries. We were there because the Polish Air Force was changing from flying Russian aircraft to American aircraft.
Okay.
And in Texas, we had F-16 fighter jets, which is what they were about to buy. So we went over on kind of like a goodwill tour to let them see what our jets were all about. They get to fly in the back seat. They get to see what it's all about. Great cultural exchange, great military exchange, just great everything. And they did a static display air show, and there were English planes there, German planes there, our jets were there. Tens of thousands of people came out just to be around the jets and be around folks from other countries. And as kind of a way to say, see you later to Russia, they had a full-length Catholic Mass on the ramp of the runway to start the day. A very overt expression of their religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And this was a huge deal. I mean, there was an altar. Everybody in the congregation performing the service, they were in their robes. The military guys on the Polish side are lined up in formation. Polish Prime Minister, all these DVs were there, and I'm documenting it. I'm walking around taking pictures and videoing and stuff. And it's all over. For the pomp and circumstance part, now we're getting to the church part. When the service started, I sat down kind of on the ground by the edge of the risers, and I just shot from a seated position the rest of the time we were there. 2 or 3 days later, one of the common things you do on these types of visits is one night the Polish military will cook for us, one night we cook for them. So on the Polish night, we're walking around, we're eating all kinds of great food, drinking way too much really good Polish vodka. Like way.
What's funny is that was the first thing I was going to say, and you beat me to it.
Oh, it was great. And this guy that looks like something like right out of a Russian spy movie, the big mustache and everything, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Yo, I'm liking you. We are drinking." And I went, "Oh, this is going to be painful." So I sat down. He goes, "Skål," and or whatever, it might be Prost. I can't remember what the toast was they used, but I said, I'm at a loss. I said, why did you want to drink with me? He goes, air show. You sat down when church started. That's respect. I am liking you. So this guy's in a formation probably 50 yards away.
Holy crap.
But they're watching everything that's going on, and he saw me take a seat. And I don't know how many other people would have seen that or noticed or cared, but he took that as a sign of respect for their country and what they were doing. So you never know where you're being, I don't want to say scrutinized, but maybe seeing how you measured up, you're being scored, and you learn very quickly that it's not at all hard to be a good visitor. It's not hard to be a good ambassador. It's also not hard to really screw it up. So you just have to be conscious of what you're doing. But every place we ever visited definitely opened my eyes up to maybe a little more of what the world is when you get up close.
Yeah.
I never went to a country and didn't want to be there. I never went to a country and met bad people.
Do you know Henry Rollins?
Yes.
Hey, I've seen him do the speaking things, and he's gone into a lot of very hairy places. And I'm trying to remember where one of the places, was it Pakistan or Afghanistan, where he was staying, it was literally walls and armed guards at the gate. And he was like, I want to go out. And they're like, no, we can't guarantee your safety. And he was like, I don't care. I want to go out. And he said, you know what I met on the other side of the wall? Nice people and great kids. Kids came up to me and wanted to see my camera. He was like, that's what I met on the other side of the wall. Yeah. Past fear. He was like, I walked past fear and I saw people just like you and me. Like it was, yeah. So not even close to being equal. I've been outside this country. You can fuss at me for this, But I also grew up super poor, still working artist, so super poor. I've only been outside this country one time for 1 hour, and it was in Windsor, Canada, because I thought my phone would work, and it didn't work. So I was like, I don't trust. We live in the 2018. This was 2018. I was like, I don't trust that I can't figure out how to get back to America. And I had to be back because I have family up there. I was like, I have to be back by a certain time, so I can't screw around. And never been outside the country, but whenever I go places, the South gets knocked a shit ton. I try to be the best representation of the South I can. And actually, I think episode 3 of this podcast, going way back, it was my buddy Sean and I just went to Detroit and Chicago to see. I'm trying to get to all the baseball stadiums. Literally just went to see baseball.
Yeah.
So even though I haven't been outside this country, I've traveled all over this country. And
think of all the people you've met from other countries that chose they'd rather be here.
And I've met, I have a funny story about that. It's like, but whenever I go, he and I talked about how this 2021, this is a hard thing to say. Guys have a tendency to make fast friends in bars and cigar shops.
Sure.
And I was like, and I say that not to be sexist or anything, but it's also a safety thing in that I am a 6'7", 285-pound man. I can feel comfortable in a lot of places because I don't have to be worried about, and I'm very fortunate. I understand that privilege. But we talked about that. I went to visit a friend I went to high school with that she didn't graduate high school. And she is a lawyer in Brooklyn. Now she's moved to Memphis. Went to Brooklyn, went and saw her. We palled around all day, went out night, hung out, ended up in this rickety bar that only took cash. I was like, love this. This is my kind of place.
Right.
And her best friend's husband was from Mexico, him and his brother. And he was a cook up there. And he couldn't get over my accent. And I just started laughing. I was like, I ain't got an accent, man. You got to trust me. I always say there are people down here I need subtitles when they talk.
That's right.
I don't know what they're saying.
That's funny.
So we're sitting there talking. We're in the back of this bar. And it's funny because you can hear it now. They had piped in cricket noises. And he was like, what the hell is this? This is annoying. I was like, oh, man, you ain't from the South, man.
That's right.
This is like, we get cicadas. He's like, what the hell's a cicada? So I started explaining it to him. And he said something like, I could hear you. I could listen to you talk. I was like, again, I can't even hear it. And I was like, you'll love this. I was like, I said, I came up here in New York one time, and everybody before I came up here the first time told me you should be nervous. People are going to try and take your money, all this shit. And I only had one issue. I was in Times Square, and a dude walked up to me who was almost as big as me, and he got right in my face, and he was just trying to sweat me down for money. And I just finally, I don't hear my accent, but I can turn it on. I just went, Bubba, I reckon we're fixing to have a problem. And he just patted me on the chest and walked the hell away from me. And I told that to that dude from Mexico, and he just went, I don't know what reckon and fixin' are.
That's right.
And I had to explain. And so he kept going, reckon. And his brother kept sitting there going, you're an idiot. Shut up. Like, it was so funny. And then he took me to a Mexican sandwich shop, and I had a torta for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was authentic. He was like, you're white. You can't handle this heat. You can't do any of this. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm sitting there eating it, and I'm staring him right in the eye, and I reach and grab the hot sauce and just start. And I looked at him. I was like, I'm from East Knoxville, motherfucker. And he was like, I don't know what that means. And my friend Christina was like, that's the black side of town. He's from the black side of town. You're not going to out-heat him. I don't care where you're from.
That's right.
And we got to go to this is very Southern, his baby mama's new husband and her had a baby, so they're having a christening. We in Asbury Park, this walk up. We walk up there. Him, his brother, Christina, my friend, and I are the only people that speak English in there. And there is a band in there, and the guy's playing the accordion, and he has the bullet straps. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, this is amazing. I know I've not been outside the country. This is America. Like, that's all I kept thinking in my head. This is America. This is America. And they offered us food, and I was like, I just ate that big torta. I can't eat. I want to eat so bad. Offering us beer. All the kids kept looking up at me. It was the most amazing thing ever. And when we left, everybody was very nice, and we left. And as we were getting in the Uber, I looked at Christina. I was like, we're two idiots from Fulton. Who the hell would have ever guessed we'd be here?
That's
now?
right.
And we took him back to that bar, and we sat out back, and we drank another beer, and he's like, I could get used to this, the crickets. I was like, yeah, welcome to my world, man.
That's right.
It was so whenever I travel, even though it's a much smaller snapshot, I don't know what start. I think it's just my dad and uncles and grandfather. Just be a nice person. Just be a nice person to people.
And that's all it takes. And you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, there's plenty of places around the country where you're definitely experiencing other cultures, where you're definitely experiencing different ways of life. And
When I was in
and
LA,
you do
I
have
did-
to kind of settle
Yeah.
in. What do they do here? How does it work here?
There was one time I was in LA for a photo shoot for work, and I had this massive headache, and I was like, I just need to find somewhere where I can get some Advil or something. Like, I can't see straight. Not enough water, whatever it was. And I ended up in the Mexican bar town, and I turn a corner, and they're having a street party. And then I turn into the Walgreens or whatever it was, and I'm walking through there. I'm the only white dude in there, even employees. And all these little kids are just staring up at me, and I'm just waving at them.
Yeah.
And I buy my Advil, and I go out, and I look at the street party, and I was like, I wish I didn't feel like shit right now. Because I would just leave my car here
Oh, absolutely.
and go party. And just be like, hey, guys, how are y'all doing? I was like, this would be an amazing story to tell if I didn't feel like my head was splitting in half.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, it also had to be funny because I was also driving a small Toyota, a Corolla, and them watching me fold into that Corolla, I saw a few, like, people turning their heads like, what is happening?
You should see my real car.
Yeah, it's even smaller. So I know that y'all have kiddos. Have you all gotten to take them places and kind of instill the same values in them?
Not so much overseas yet. That's a big plan of ours. Our kids, they get it.
Yeah.
And our daughter especially, she's been to Canada. She went on a school trip that had to do, oh man, I feel bad, I'm drawing a blank on this. She is studying to be a special education teacher, and
Awesome.
she was associated with the high school version of whatever civic organization addresses. I feel bad that I've forgotten the name. It's been a couple of years now. But as part of that group, she had the opportunity to go to Canada for 3 or 4 days. She loved it, thoroughly enjoyed it, just the idea that she was in a different place. And then we weren't on this trip, but our son had a chance to take a school trip. And we just kind of looked at it. It was not cheap. It wasn't something that I can say we could easily afford. But we said, this is the stuff we've been preaching to our kids their whole lives,
Right.
is that these are the adventures you need to take. And he went on a school trip to Stockholm, Denmark, and Amsterdam. And so he's been to countries we haven't even seen yet and loved it, loved that things were different.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to talk with him because, as you can imagine, the extensive conversation I get from a teenager, a boy, about this kind of stuff. Our daughter can go downtown to Knoxville, and she can come back and talk to us about it for longer than she was gone. And our son went away for like a week and comes back home, and we've had like 10 minutes of conversation about it. But then we'll go somewhere, and he'll say, oh, this is like when we were in Amsterdam, and then he'll tell us this story about something that
Yeah.
they did. Was that, this is the kind of stuff that we wanted to hear about.
Yeah.
He goes, I know. But anyway, this is what we did. So they enjoy travel. They appreciate travel. They just are nice people. They enjoy seeing the differences a
Yeah.
little bit. So just like dragging them to concerts or anything else, we always want our kids to be socially adapted. We want them to understand that you may go to places that are completely different.
Yeah.
You may not get it at all, but guess what? If you're nice and you appreciate the difference, you're going to love it. And so far they have. So that's
good.
been hopefully part of what we're raising them to do and what they appreciate. And so far it's working very well.
Awesome. So you're still, is it called active when you're in the reserves? What is that?
Well, I'm not even in the military at all anymore.
Okay.
I retired from everything in 2017 with just under 26 years of service. Had no idea what I was going to do after that. Didn't know what was coming. Not a clue. And then ended up at the end of 2018, like the day after Christmas, I came back as a civil servant, strictly a civilian job.
Okay.
And I'm what's called an Airman and Family Readiness Manager now. So I work just to be a resource, source of information, source of support for our military members, because like any other job that anybody else does, if you can keep your personal life squared away, your personal business squared away, your bills, your stressors of any kind, anything to do with your family, anything we can do to help those things go better, you're just that much more prepared to come do the job that the military needs you to do. So it's kind of just a way to look after our military people right on up through the time that they leave. So a lot of their transition when they retire, I work with our people when they do that. It's anything that can be additional help. So if somebody is just having trouble with, I'm now going to go from a part-time military position as a reservist or a guardsman to a full-time military member, which means that now I've got to find daycare. Well, maybe I can help them find the daycare they need. Or maybe they need to find a better job for their spouse, and I can help them with their resumes, and I can help them with their applications and things like that. So it's just anything that offers an additional layer of support. And I work very closely with our base chaplains. I work closely with our base social worker. Anybody that's providing support to our military members, I'm just right in the middle of that. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. I still get to work on a base. I still work in a very military-like role, but it's still just that great service job. But I'm a civilian now. I don't have to do the military stuff.
I hate to go down a rambling man path, but I had a friend that when she was pregnant, she was 4 months pregnant, and she was talking to me about daycare. And she's like, we're already behind. We should have already signed up for daycares. I was like, the baby is still in your belly. Yeah. And she was like, oh, yeah, that's how it goes. And the more I thought about it over the years, I was like, I shouldn't have got into drawing pictures for a living. I should have gotten into daycare. I'm good with kids. I couldn't deal with the vomit, but I can deal with kids. I love kids. It's like, damn it, I should have gotten into daycare. And that's all I hear now is like how essential and how necessary daycare is.
Oh, sure.
Even before. So you saying that, it's like, yeah, I never even thought about that. Yeah. Having to help find daycare.
Yeah.
Is
so now picture a family where the military members are both the mother and the father, and they're traditional weekender guardsmen. So once a month, they need not only daycare on a weekend, which is next to impossible, but they may even need it in the evening hours because of the shift that they might be working.
And they may be stationed here, but from like Arkansas and don't have grandparents to watch the kid.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I tell people lovingly is that it's not a big a problem in East Tennessee for those things as it is in other places, because here you got Meemaw. And there is a lot of family where the family is still here. So we have a lot of military members that were born and raised here. Family is still here. Families are still close to each other physically and family-wise.
Right.
So they have those kind of resources to look out for. So it's not as big a problem for us as it is in some places, but those are the kind of things that can come up that maybe I help them find.
I will say, have you ever heard of Smoky Mountain Service Dogs?
Yes.
Anytime I can give them a shout out, I give them a shout out. So when I worked for PetSafe, Randy Boyd would give away $1 million a year pre-EBITDA. I had to learn what EBITDA was. And I cannot tell you what that means now. It's about the pre-tax money and pre-gross or hell, I can't even remember. But he gave him $1 million, and he said it has to be for pet-related nonprofits or kids continuing education. That's what it has to be for. So $1 million. So I'm on this committee. I was on the committee for like 3 or 4 years out of the 5 years I was there. And it was always somebody would come in and pitch us. Half of the room would be crying when they left. And it's just, and that's how it would go. And usually by March we were out of money because everybody who came in, we're like, yes, let's give them all. So, and me, the guy in charge, John Brenda, and I think we're the only two guys, and the rest were women. And John was very matter of fact, directed. No, we can't give them $40,000. We can give them $20,000. Like he had to really watch the bottom line. So we're sitting there and listening to all these. I think it's like May, and we had 2 back to back, and one of them was, I hope I'm not crapping on these people. It was like Golden Retriever Rescue. I was like, come on. And they were wanting us to sponsor some run where they were wanting to give them a lot of money. I was like, you're West Knoxville based. It's Golden Retrievers. You're probably good. It's not pit bulls. You know, what the hell are you talking about? And you looked at like their operating income. It's like, they're good. They don't need our money.
Yeah.
But then the next people came in with Smoky Mountain Service Dogs. And they did their pitch. And didn't cry. I started getting angry by the end because I was just like, and they pitched and they gave us the thing of like, what they do is they help soldiers who come back who are missing limbs.
Mm-hmm.
And they would train the dogs, and it costs like $20,000 to $25,000 over a year or two to train the dog. I was like, that doesn't seem like anything to me. Like, that seems like a drop in the bucket. Like, I feel like it should have been a lot more than that. But then they told the story about this guy who came back and he had lost below the knee, and he was afraid to go out because he was afraid he'd fall and be embarrassed, and he ballooned up, gained weight. So he got this dog, started working with it, and his first foray out, he's like, I'm going to go to Cracker Barrel because I know I can just go and walk around, and then I can go home. That was his exercise for the day. And so he went, and he turned a corner too quick, and he said, and I felt it. I felt that I'm going to fall. And right as he did, the dog braced him, and he did not fall. So I'm sitting there like shaking, wanting to punch a wall because I'm a Collins man. We can't cry. We punch walls. and they tell us that story and they tell us how much it costs. And they're like, and I think that they were still early on, or they, weren't as big. And when they walked out of the room, I was like, so we're giving them all the money, right? Right? And like, people weren't crying. I was like, I almost went, fuck all of you all. We're giving them, because the one point I raised my hand, I was like, are the dogs purebred or are they rescues? They're like, we can't use rescues because we don't know what trauma they had beforehand, but we're looking at phase 2 being taking in rescues to help with PTSD issues. I was like, fuck, can I just get, John, let's get more money. Like, I just wanted to give them all of them. I was so angry, sounds like an aggressive term, but I was just like, they should have all the money.
Yeah, frustration.
Like, I was just like, you all shouldn't have to be coming here and ask. Like, I don't know what we have to do. And so that
they do have a license plate that I wish that they would, not they, but I don't know if you know this, but when you see these different license plates, so when they put the plate out, they say, we're going to do a plate, and it's there. I believe it's for Smoky Mountain Service.
Okay.
It's been so long now I can't remember. But when they put the plate out, there's got to be 1,000 pre-orders for a plate before they start making that plate. I put in for that plate, I don't know how long ago, and it's for service. I think it might be Smoky Mountain Service Dogs.
Okay.
But
I'm going to have to give them a call again because I think it's older people. So here's a little weird fact about me. I've been on like 30 plus nonprofit boards or executive committees because I did a thing at the New Sentinel and I raised a shit ton of money for the United Way using social media in like 2008 when social media was just new. And I raised double the amount we should have because I just knew marketing and knew how to do it.
Yeah.
We spent no money, and we were supposed to raise like $67,000, and we raised $148,000.
That's wonderful.
So I got invited to all these things of being like, he can tell you, pitch to the loaned executives on how to raise money. So I got asked to be on all these boards and stuff. And I've helped a lot of nonprofits, but Smoky Mountain Service Dogs, I think I emailed them. And this has been like 5 or 6 years. And I was like, hey, I want to help. I was like, I look at your social media, I look at your website. Please let me help because I love you all and I want. And they're like, can we talk on the phone? I was like, I think y'all are older people. And I tried doing on the phone a time or two, and it just never seemed. I'm gonna try again. I'm saying that right now. I'm gonna try again because I'm like, no, I want to help you. I will give them my time. I don't want any money. I don't want anything. Just let me do it the right way. Because I was like, because you're telling me that, I was like, oh, I know how to work that on social media to get your 1,000.
Yeah.
And we'll get it in a month. I'll get that in a month. No.
Well, and don't hold me to it being Smoky Mountain Service Dogs.
Yes.
I know for a fact it is a Service Dogs license plate. I think it might be them, but I could be wrong on that.
I think they were based out of Madisonville or Monroe County, and then they moved up here because I knew when the Vietnam Wall, that miniature
The traveling one, yeah.
Yeah, Dad and I went to it when it was out here in Fountain City, and they were there. But it wasn't. It was like volunteers. It wasn't the main people. And I was like, "Oh, that's." And I explained to Dad, and he was like, "That sounds amazing. What the hell?" I was like, "Yeah." So that's why I asked. You know, when you say that to outreach, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a huge thing."
Yeah.
I'm weird in that I am totally being humble and honest in that I know that I talk out of my ass or whatever. But I'm also nerdy enough to look at how much money we spend. So when I see the stuff of like PTSD and with healthcare with troops, you know, people coming, veterans and stuff, it frustrates the shit out of me because I know we still build tanks and they're sitting in a desert in Nevada. And I'm just like, why can we not break this down the simplest? Why are we stop? Like from a business mind, it's like, well, we still have a contract for 10 years. It's like, get out of it. Figure out a way to get out of it. We got no, and then take that money and put it over here in Veterans Affairs. What are we doing? Like that's the shit that I get angry about. That I'm just like,
Sure.
And I'm like, I know I haven't served. I know I don't know what the. I just know what I'm reading, and I'm not reading when it comes to politics one side or the other. No, I'm reading. I'm nerding out. I'm getting down to the brass tacks. Like, okay, here's where this money is spending. Here's where, and just. So that's the stuff that I get because I look at something like Smoky Mountain Service Dogs. I was like, this should be part. I would gladly give over my tax dollars.
Well, I can tell you that one of the things that is frustrating for many people when it comes to looking out for veterans, people are wonderful to veterans. They really are. There are so many charities that it sometimes just gets a little blurry for how many are out there. Who should I support? What should I get involved with? Where can my money do the most good? Sometimes even like the names of what they do sound almost like exactly the same thing. And then you look at one and they have like a 5% administrative cost every year. Yeah. And then some people realize 55% is administrative cost. And you're going, wait. So in terms of people supporting organizations, it can get you kind of mad, and I've even been a victim of it letting me get mad. And there are a lot of ways for military people to support all sorts of charitable organizations, and we tend to do very well at it. But I'll just give you an example, and I'm not going to name any organizations, but there was a particular charitable group that really tugged at my heartstrings one day, and I was really touched, and I wanted to do my part to help. And I wrote him a check, and I was happy to do it. And I joined, and I was proud to be a supporter. And I think that organization sold my address to every single charity in the world. And I got so much mail to where I was getting like 4 and 5 pieces of mail a day from every charity in the world. And after a while, you just go, I've had it. I'm done. And I don't open it. I don't look at any of it. And I know they're all wonderful organizations, but if you just get to the point where you're bothering somebody,
Yeah.
you just not only ruined your chances, but you ruined other charities' chances at the same time. So I remind myself to stay true to the organizations and the causes that you do believe in and continue to support them, and it'll work out. I mean, people, you're not going to cover everybody. You're never going to, but there are ways that you can get involved in anonymous fashion, which I need to remember to do because there was probably a box I should have checked and I didn't. But I would say don't let that get you too upset because you've done so much of this. You know how this works. And at the end of the day, you're supposed to feel good about what you were doing. Yeah. So I can tell you also in that same vein that military members and veterans do appreciate the support. They never take it for granted, and they know that we're not the first thought on people's minds during the day. So when you do something that does support us in any fashion, and I forget sometimes that I'm a veteran just in the fact that I still work for a military base. I feel like I'm still a working dude. But there are some things that benefit me, and I remember that, and I don't take it for granted. And most of your military people never will. So it's appreciated, anything that anybody ever does.
Yeah. So a fun, sad fact is when I worked for the print shop for 5 years, a third of our work was nonprofits. So I got to design and read annual reports and seeing those administrative costs. Especially there's one in town that I will not mention on here because I'm sure I'll get sued if I mention them. But their ED, and this is 2003, was making $300,000 a year. And I was like, that's a problem. Because they're not they're raising money, but how many more people could that have helped?
Yeah.
But then
are you fundraising or are you salary raising?
Right.
What are you really raising that money for?
That's why I always point people to, I was like, for my money, out of all those charities we looked at, and I'm sorry, well, my friend's no longer CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, so he's not so angry at me for saying that. Second Harvest Food Bank. If you ever want to give your money, give money, don't give food. Because what they have done is insane, and that like they work with food distributors to like, if a can gets knocked, they can't sell it, but they'll sell it to Second Harvest Food Bank for pennies on the dollar. Mm-hmm. And so they've worked ways like that to where they get an insane amount of food for so little money to where if you give them $5, they'll be able to get $500 worth of food for your $5. So it's better than just taking them a can of beans that's been in your cabinet for too long.
Well, and not only that, but that can of beans, like you say, I visited there, and when they show you that they ask for food, not ask for food, they purchase food that doesn't have labels on it because they can get the food that much cheaper. They can label it themselves for their purposes, and that turns into so many more cans because they just didn't have to have a label put on it. It's insane how good they are at what they do. Right. I mean, you're right. They are definitely an organization to be proud of. Yeah, that's a great point.
And that they go to people, that they go to food. Yeah. I'll tell you this one thing. I have two more things. So there's a thing I've been asking people that I don't know that I've formulated the answer to, but you said chewing on. This is something I've been chewing on for a long time. And I'll give you the answer that I just got from somebody that I think is a fantastic answer.
Okay.
Is America a good idea? That's my thought. And so I just interviewed Chris Battle at Battlefield Farms, who is a black man, who is a pastor, and who had, you talk about nonprofit to support. He is setting up farms in food deserts to help with impoverished areas. Like he doesn't have one farm. He has tons of farms in like people's backyards, in empty fields. And he's sparing no piece of the cow. Like he was showing me like, oh yeah, there were worms here and they were just going to pick this up and take it out of it. I went through there and picked through the poop and got every single worm and put it in this tub over here. He's like, I've found out that it's cheaper now because wood's so expensive. Instead of buying a raised bed, you get a bathtub because a bathtub is like 1/10 of the cost, and it makes more sense to people to see that it's a lot easier buy-in to do this. If you can just do a bathtub, you don't have to build a raised bed. Then a lot of the people in food deserts can start growing their own food. And I said to him, I was like, as a black man who is a pastor, do you think America is a good idea? And he's like, if you're a white man, yes. But I think what we're going through right now is the growing pains. And that's what's happening. And I was like, holy shit, that's like the best answer I've heard so far. Because other people are like, nah, and yeah, of course it is. USA. I say, I think the tenets, I think the idea, I think everything is, what is it? Our heart is in the right place. Or our head is in the right place if we can only get our heart there. That's what I think of a lot. Because I see so much, to your point about the guy in Iceland, about why do we kill ourselves? And I see all this stuff that goes in every day in the news. I'm like, anytime there's a disaster, you can't get to you can't donate blood because there's so many people there. Why can't, and that's what I talked to him about. It's like, why can't we just be in that mode all the time about giving a shit about one another? So I don't know that there's an answer to that, but that's something maybe to think about. Like, that's just something that's been on my mind for like the past, pre-pandemic, for like the past 2 or 3 years. Is America a good idea? Not good place, good idea. And what you were saying earlier about, like, melting pot is not a strong enough word. We've outgrown melting pot.
Right.
Like, and I was like, no, all of what you said kind of coupled with what he said, I was like, yeah, that's it. We have every race here. We have every level of wealth inequality. We have people fighting to get 90 miles from Cuba on a wooden desk to get here.
Oh, sure.
Like Raul Malo of the Mavericks said, from hell to paradise. Like, that's what I keep thinking about. And I don't know. It's a big question. It's a big question that I don't know there's an answer to, but I don't know. I don't know. If you have any thoughts, you're welcome.
Not me, buddy.
Okay.
That's out of my brain power. That's for sure.
So here's my big, crazy, zany idea.
All right.
We'll end on this. Because I look at numbers and money and stuff, I've had this thought for 15 years. And this goes into is America a good idea? And I was like, and maybe you can answer this, maybe you can't. Maybe this, again, too big of a question to ask. I look at the numbers of how many people are overseas. And I had this idea like 15 years ago. I was like, can we take half of the people that are overseas, bring them back here, and go into like Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Philadelphia, all these old warehouse towns, and because they're so efficient and stuff, build up these warehouses, work on bridges, work on roads to help build America as a country back up. And the reason I said that about the manufacturing plants, I was like, there's a lot of companies that can't afford to manufacture stuff in the States because it would cost them $30 to $50 million just to bring. I've seen all those abandoned buildings in Memphis, and it's sad. I was like, these are all have great bones, but bringing them out to electrical code, safety code, getting rid of the asbestos, I'm sure. Like, but that was my crazy, weird thought, like, that I had 15 years ago. I was like, can we do that? All those service people are so skilled at building a base in the side of a damn mountain.
That's right.
Let's bring them back to Cleveland. I know you're stationed in Cleveland. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Melt is one of the most amazing restaurants in the world. I'll open a tab at Melt for you to go and eat. But that was a weird thought I've had that I keep pitching. I'm like, I don't know how to make this happen. I don't know if this is really a good idea. But
well, you don't use your military for that. That's not the
Okay.
role. That was never the intention. But for all the reasons you just said, you've got Peace Corps, you've got AmeriCorps, so why not have AmeriBuild and make it a program
There you
for veterans and other
Yeah.
professionals that as you get out, hey, we're going to put you to work, make it so that, like in my case, you retire from the military and you get your retirement check. Well, we'll pay you the difference in your retirement pay and what your salary was before you retired, and you can go into these areas and let's get to work and build things.
Yeah.
It's always a fascinating conversation, and it's always one that you can get many, many, many opinions as to what a military's role should be.
Okay.
And that even comes down to the role of a National Guard member is vastly different from that of an active duty military member or
Okay.
a reservist. Because if you're a National Guard member, you primarily work for your state first. You're a
Okay.
Tennessee National Guard member. So your first line of boss is your governor.
Okay.
And then if something terrible happens, you can be federalized and put on a different set of military orders that now you became basically an active duty military
Okay.
member.
Okay.
But it gets very hairy about where you legally can use your military
Yeah.
and from a philosophical and an ethical standpoint where you should be using your military. But I think there is a huge lane open of possibilities where those skills that you're just
Yeah.
talking about, and I think and again, you've got two people here talking out of their butts. It really, I mean, I'm making it up as fast as you're asking it, but I was just in a class today. We had a thing at our base today out at McGee Tyson. A part of our base had a resiliency day, and I taught a session on resiliency. And one of the things that one of the commanders out there was commenting on was the fact that we are very nimble, we are very flexible military forces, and maybe sometimes that's not the right answer to where we can drop everything, deploy, and be in theater maybe faster than we should be as
Yeah.
far as how we adapt to the change. And then on the other hand, how quickly we come from like in the heart of the theater of a battle and a war situation to where we're back home in our hometown and expected to get back to a normal life. Maybe something that could help the long-term wellness of our military members is you've served your country, you've now retired, or you've separated and you're a veteran. Maybe a transition type of job where you're still working for your government, but you're putting it to a more constructive use in our country or your state or your city.
Yeah.
Who's to say that wouldn't be a really cool, professional
Yeah.
AmeriCorps type of service where you continue your service a little bit longer and you give back a little bit more and you start working on this is going to be more of what it feels like when you become a civilian. I think that possibility would be a wonderful thing to explore because not that I had anything traumatic when I left, but when you do leave the military, it is a very abrupt change because you've lived a life a certain way for quite a few years, and you say, well, you can do whatever you want when you get done. Well, that's great, but what I wanted to do, for the most part, I just left. That's why I
Right.
did it for 20-something years. Trying to reinvent yourself in a way that still is as fulfilling as what you left is usually a challenge for people.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that my job revolves around, is helping people get ready for that change and making it a good one. Some people, many people, leave the military. They get up that next Monday morning and it's like, woo, I'm headed to the golf course. There are a lot of people
Yeah.
also that when they get up, they feel like half their identity is still hanging in that
Yeah.
closet because they're not putting that uniform on today. Just like in any other career. I mean,
Right.
any career, when people leave, it is a big change, but who knows? Maybe that's a fix, is a way that you can start putting those skills back to making it better here.
I don't know where it came from, but
It's a great idea.
I just remember. I think it came out of people complain about Walmart and made in China. I was like, yeah, but the cost of taking those and one that did it right was like, I think Hershey's went in somewhere in a small town in Ohio and said, screw it, we're going to make Hershey's chocolate.
Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Okay, no, then it wasn't Hershey's. Nestle. It may have been Nestle. Whoever it was, they were just like, no, we're going to start making this shit in America again. And I was like, from an analytical side, my brain was like, yeah, but they also had to invest like $35 million. A lot of people can't do that. But it would almost be like, well, the cost of then, instead of paying the $50 million up front to bring everything up to code and stuff, because I feel like I have faith that the military people could do it better and more efficiently and get it done. Like, and, but then the cost of starting to do that would be, let's say, $12 million as opposed to $62 million. And I was like, what? You know, bridges, all this stuff now. And it's finally coming around to where, like, hey, we need to invest in infrastructure. Like, our bridges are
real infrastructure.
Like we're having problems. And I was like, yeah, we've been having those problems for like 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
It's just finally getting addressed. And I was like, yeah, this was something, God knows, it's probably drinking when this idea came up. And there's one buddy of mine that God knows how many hundreds of times he's heard me say this, just like, the hell ain't we doing this, man? We're taking all this money and let's invest this money smart. Like, this is what we should be doing. I wish I could run for politics. I can't run for politics. I put too many people in the hospital in my youth, breaking noses and breaking faces. I'm terrified that if I ever try to run the dirt, that they would dig up on me. And they're like, "We see you sold drugs in high school." It's like, yeah, but I still got this idea about AmeriBuild. I like that about AmeriBuild.
That's right.
I know I sold drugs. I'm better now. We're going to talk about this now. All I bought were CDs and dinner for girls, impressing girls. That's all I did with that drug money.
I had their number on my beeper.
I used to take girls to. They were used to guys taking them to McDonald's. I would take them to Louis, and they were just like, "What is this?" I was like, "You know what? The sad fact is, it's like $7 more a meal. It's not that much more,
Right?
but it looked nicer." And I was like,
Lubies.
"Yeah, yeah." It was so funny, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, that's my big crazy idea.
I think it's a great idea. I think that would be so good on so many levels for so many people.
Especially, like, I used to go to Cleveland every year, and that restaurant I'm talking about, Melt, I'm not kidding, is ridiculous. It's these grilled cheese sandwiches as big as my head, and I love it. I was talking to somebody about that the other day, and she was like, I can never finish one of those. I was like, I can, and have. And ate dessert and drink beer with it. But driving from, like, downtown out to Lakewood to that, just passing by miles where I'm like, I'm the only one out here right now. It's like, what
happened?
Like, what are we doing, man?
Yeah.
Like, there's a great guy in Sparta, Tennessee that builds kayaks, Eric Jackson. And I think he said he employs 400 people. And I was like, hell yeah. I was like, I'm not a big USA, but you're doing that and you're employing that town, and that's better than Walmart. Love it. Love to see it. Want to see more of it. That's what I believe in. So, I don't know. There's my bullshit. That's how we'll end, is on my stupid shit. All right. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. I always enjoy talking with you. This has been great.